If you've ever seen a movie or read a book about the end of the world, you've definitely run into these two huge ideas, the rapture and the second coming. And usually, they're shown as two totally separate things. One is this secret, sudden disappearance, and the other is this massive public return of Christ. But what if that popular picture we all have in our heads isn't quite what the Bible is actually describing? Well, we're going to dive right into the text and see if we can decode this biblical mystery. So this really brings us to the core question, the whole reason we're doing this explainer. Are we looking at two completely different events, maybe separated by years? Or are these just two different ways of describing one single, incredible climactic moment? The source material we're looking at today has a very clear and pretty bold argument. It says that the so-called rapture and the second coming, they aren't two separate events at all. Nope. The idea is that they are actually just different descriptions of the exact same grand finale. So let's start unpacking the evidence for that. Okay, so according to this interpretation, before we can even begin to understand the end times, we have to back up. We've got to understand the biblical view of what happens after we die. It's kind of the foundation for the entire argument. This analysis breaks it down into these three states you see right here. First, there's physical death for the body is described as sleeping in the grave. Then an intermediate state where you're with Christ, but you're awaiting something more. And finally, number 3, the resurrection. And this is the key takeaway. The ultimate goal, the main event, is always presented as a future physical resurrection when Christ returns. And to really drive home this idea of death as a kind of unconscious sleep, the text points to passages just like this one from Ecclesiastes. The thinking here is that this language describes a state of total inactivity, not an immediate trip to a fully conscious afterlife. The whole focus is on waiting for a future awakening. So this is the really crucial point being made here. The primary hope that's presented in Scripture isn't about your soul escaping your body to go live as a spirit somewhere. Instead, the focus, again and again, is on a future physical, bodily resurrection. That's presented as the ultimate victory over death. All right, so with that foundation set, let's see how it changes the way we read that key rapture passage. We're going to zoom way in on the main text that's used to support the idea of a separate, secret event, 1 Thessalonians chapter 4. And here's the context. The Apostle Paul is writing this to comfort people who are grieving. So he lays out this sequence of events for them. You've got the Lord descending, you've got this huge trumpet blast, the dead rise, and then the living are caught up together with them. So when we actually break it down, what's being described here? Does this sound secret to you? Not at all. This interpretation highlights that it's this incredibly loud cosmic event. The Lord is coming down, not calling people up to leave for good. And the most important action here is the resurrection of the dead, uniting them with the living in one single moment. Now, get ready for this, because here's a fascinating piece of evidence that centers on just one Greek word, apantesis, the word translated as meat. See, in the ancient world, this wasn't just a casual, hey, how's it going? It was a specific term for a formal welcome party. Citizens would leave their city to go out and meet a visiting king or dignitary, and then they would escort him back into their city with a huge celebration. And this just brilliantly illustrates the argument, doesn't it? If Paul is using apantesis the way everyone in his culture would have understood it, then the picture isn't believers escaping earth. No, it's a grand welcoming committee rising to meet their returning king in the air, to escort him back down to earth in triumph. It completely flips the script. Okay, so if that whole rapture passage is actually describing a welcome party for the second coming, what happens when we compare that passage to other descriptions of Christ's return? Let's see how the dots connect. This comparison table is really the heart of the whole argument. I mean, just look at it. The key features are practically identical. You've got the trumpet in both. You've got the Lord's arrival in both. You have the gathering of believers in both. The argument is that these details are just way too similar to be a coincidence. So you have to ask, are these really two different moments, or are they just different camera angles on the same massive event? So the conclusion that's drawn from all this textual evidence is pretty simple and direct. The biblical story seems to speak of one final return, one great resurrection of the dead, and one final trumpet blast that signals the whole thing.
And this idea of a single last trumpet isn't a one-off. It's reinforced right here in 1 Corinthians. This passage describes the transformation of all believers, both the living and the resurrected dead, happening instantly in the twinkling of an eye at this final trumpet sound. It doesn't really leave room for multiple stages or a long gap of time.
So what's the final picture painted by this whole analysis? Well, when you take all these passages and you lay them side by side, they seem to create this incredible portrait of one single climactic event. It's public, it's loud, it's glorious, and it includes the resurrection, the gathering of believers, and the return of Christ, all rolled into one incredible moment. And that leaves us with a really big final question to think about. If this interpretation is right, if it really is all one unified event, what does that change? How does it reframe the focus of Christian hope? Maybe it shifts it away from an escape from the world to the triumphant return of a king to the world. It's definitely something to chew on.